Hello and welcome to another episode of Snakes Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, maybe leave us a 5-star review if you'd be so kind to do so over on an audio-only platform. My name is Jesse Friedman, as always joined by the one and only Jack Sommers. And Jack, a lot of things have happened since our last episode, not necessarily relating to the Diamondbacks. The Dodgers did a thing that we'll talk about a little bit later on today's show. But to get things started, we wanted to talk about something that hasn't happened that maybe could, with, of course, a number of people speculating about Paul Goldschmidt, the possibility of the D-backs bringing him back. So, Jack, first of all, how's life? And how do we feel? How do we feel about the possibility of Goldy coming back to the D-backs?
Well, I created a little bit of a kerfuffle on X platform by discussing, dropping a hint that some move was coming quickly, and it hasn't happened yet. And everyone assumed that it was a Goldy deal and are waiting breathlessly for updates. Well, I do have an update, but it may not be the one that everyone's looking for with regards to Goldy. The information that I have is, yes, of course, Paul wants to play in 2026, but he's looking for a full-time job. He wants a full-time role. And the Diamondbacks are very interested. They would like to bring him back, but in a part-time role, obviously, to be the right-hand side of a platoon. So they're at an impasse at that point. Not only as far as the role, but of course, that impacts dollars because Paul would get paid more for a full-time role as opposed to a part-time role. By way of comparison, for example, Randall Grichuk, who they paid $2 million in 2024, and eventually, once the buyout was paid, $5 million in 2025 to be right-hand DH, right-handed outfielder. I think Evan Longoria probably got, I don't know, 1.5, 2 million. Oh no, sorry, Evan Longoria got $5 million back in 2023. So I think that's kind of the range that the Diamondbacks are looking for. I don't think that they're willing to pay more than $5 million for Paul, on a part-time role. So what I also heard, obviously the Padres have an opening at first base. And so, he could conceivably sign over there, but they don't have a lot of money to spend. And as a matter of fact, $5 million this year and $6 million next year turned out to be too much money for the Padres to absorb to bring in Arenado to play first base for them. So I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but they've been long rumored to be in on the Paul Goldschmidt deal because of the fact that they can offer a full-time job. So we'll have to wait and see what happens and whether they can break that impasse, what happens with Paul's market. At the end of the day, if there isn't a full-time job out for him and he's got to pick through offers for a part-time role, then it becomes like, what team? I think that the difference for Paul between $4 million and $5 million and $6 million, I don't know how much that is going to make the difference. I think it's going to be more about comfort level and wanting to get a shot back at the playoffs. So if some team that's at the forefront of playoff contention, maybe a little higher up than the Diamondbacks, that could be an impediment for the D-backs as well. So as of right now, it's kind of a wait and see game and see who can wait out who.
This feels to me, Jack, like kind of the age-old situation where a player who's very, very good during his prime is maybe having a hard time adjusting to how the market feels about him. I mean, you look at Paul Goldschmidt's numbers in 2025, and you can see why teams are more interested in him as a platoon guy than as an everyday player. He had a 731 OPS overall with the Yankees in 2025, which on the surface seems fine. But you break it out versus right-handed pitching and left-handed pitching, as it shows on the screen here, it was a 619 OPS against righties and a pretty big sample size of 366 plate appearances versus a 981 OPS against lefties in 168 plate appearances in 2025. That, of course, all happening with the New York Yankees. And you and I went a layer deeper than this, Jack, and looked at some of the underlying stats. And they confirm this. I mean, if anything, the underlying stats portray the gap as being even wider. Paul Goldschmidt had a 440 expected WOBA against lefties in 2025 versus a 280 mark against righties. An expected WOBA is a kind of an all-encompassing stat that reads like an on-base percentage, but factors in walks and strikeouts along with the batted ball data, how hard you're hitting the ball and whatnot. And again, the difference there is just absolutely massive. So I get it from Goldy's perspective, Jack, that like, I mean, he literally won the MVP less than 4 years ago. I mean, he's not that far removed from being that guy, but it's hard to honestly look at his numbers from 2025 and feel like you still want him to be an everyday player.
Yeah. And, look, I think that's just the reality of the situation. He's 38 years old. I mean, Father Time always wins, undefeated. That's never going to change. At the same time, it's interesting to look at him compared to some of the other first basemen on the market, as well as a right-handed first baseman that the D-backs have in their system. So if we take a look at Paul Goldschmidt, what's on the screen here for the folks listening on audio only is a chart showing the 2025 statistics and then a projection for 4 players: Paul Goldschmidt, Ty France, Rhys Hoskins, and Tyler Locklear. The first 3, of course, are free agents. Tyler Locklear is recovering from surgery, and I'll update a little bit on him in a moment. But as you can see, in 2025, none of these players had excellent seasons. Paul's OPS was 731, as Jesse said. Ty France had a 680 OPS. Rhys Hoskins had a 748, which is okay. It's above average, kind of a little low in the batting average department, and didn't quite slug as much as you would expect. He hit 237 with a 416 slug. And then Tyler Locklear, of course, really struggled in 100-plus plate appearances in the major leagues in 2025 with a 175 average and a 529 OPS. However, we do also have projections. The average projection that I'm showing here is the average of ZiPS, Steamer, and the Bat X. All of those projections are available at Fangraphs. And Goldy's projected to hit 255 with a 733 OPS. Ty France, 253 with a 705 OPS. Rhys Hoskins, 221 with a 724 OPS. And then surprisingly, Locklear is almost in the same ballpark, a 239 batting average and a 704 OPS. So I thought that was kind of interesting that Locklear's projection, obviously based off his minor league numbers, which were very, very good, is still almost league average, not for a first baseman, but just in general, despite the fact that he had a really poor 100-plus plate appearances in 2025.
I guess the question then becomes, are you willing to pay Paul Goldschmidt whatever it takes, 4 or 5 million, whatever that number winds up being, in order to partially block Tyler Locklear? I mean, the Diamondbacks traded for Tyler Locklear not that long ago, and presumably are interested in seeing what they have with him. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to sign a veteran who plays the exact same position, who you'd also want in there against lefties. I guess the flip side of that, Jack, is you could just have one of the guys DH against lefties, and then the other guy plays first base. Maybe it's Tyler Locklear who gets in there and plays first base most of the time against lefties once he's ready to go, and Goldy plays, just slides in at the DH role. So I think it still does make some sense. I mean, as of right now, the Diamondbacks lineup against left-handed pitching still feels a little flat. There's room for them to improve in that regard. I guess it just comes down, as you were talking about earlier, to like what are the Diamondbacks willing to spend for a player that they believe is a platoon guy, and is Paul Goldschmidt even willing to sign with a team that views him that way?
The other thing to consider there, Jesse, is there's only 4 bench spots.
Yeah.
One of them's a catcher, one of them's James McCann, right? The other's got to be a utility infielder, and then if you've got one of Goldy or Locklear as your right-handed option at first base, then you've only got one other spot, like for a utility outfielder.
Yeah, it's a great point.
So I don't think that there's room on the roster to have 2 right-handed first base /DH players. So what the Diamondbacks, by indicating their interest in Paul Goldschmidt, they're willing to block Locklear. I mean, that's my take on it. The one thing about Locklear to note is that I checked today, actually, with one of the other beat writers, because I didn't get a chance to ask Mike Hazen that in our last call. What's Locklear's status? And the understanding I got was that they don't expect him to be too delayed. So he probably won't be on the opening day roster, but it doesn't sound like it's going to go past, the month of April. He may even be back before May 1.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down once again to how much are the Diamondbacks willing to block some of the in-house options that they have. Of course, that was part of the calculus with signing Nolan, or not signing, although it sort of feels like that's what they did, with trading for Nolan Arenado. They're at least partially blocking Jordan Lawler and Blaze Alexander in some form or fashion. There's fewer plate appearances to go around. Obviously, they were still willing to do that in that situation. Will they be willing to do it with Tyler Locklear? I guess that remains to be seen. We'll see how this all shakes out. The other aspect of this, Jack, of course, is the payroll situation. I know you have an updated look at that here as the Diamondbacks sit at $170.24 million, at least according to our calculations. This, of course, including Taylor Clarke, a pitcher the Diamondbacks signed, a pitcher they brought back here in the past few days. We're going to talk about him here in a few moments. But yeah, Jack, what do you got on just kind of the payroll situation as it stands right now?
Well, I mean, it certainly seems to me, and we're going to get into that a little bit more when we talk about the bullpen and some of Mike's comments. And, again, what I'm hearing about wanting Goldy for a part-time role, clearly that limits what they can pay for him. So it certainly seems like, barring or, last minute surprise, which the Diamondbacks do surprise us at times, it looks like they're going to come in under 180 by the time they perhaps bring in another reliever and another position player. It does, might even be right around 175. So we'll see where they end up. We'll keep tracking it. We'll let everybody know exactly what those numbers are as it unfolds. But barring a surprise, which again, the caveat always is Ken's unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. But barring a surprise, it looks like they're going to fall in between 175 and 180. And, if you look at where they were last year, opening day was 195. So, it's a $20 million drop.
Yeah. It is about going back to the very beginning of the offseason. It's around where we figured they might land when all is said and done. You referenced the Diamondbacks adding potentially another reliever. They did just add one, as I alluded to a few moments ago. Taylor Clarke is back with the Diamondbacks. We're going to talk about that move, as well as the Dodgers and what they did over the weekend as well. We're going to get into all of that on the other side of this break.
Nobody likes a bloated cell phone bill. It can consume you. It can take over. It can be very annoying. So I know that 2025 ended Kratz, and that's when you have your end of year sales, but there actually is still one sale that is running until the end of the month.
Mint Mobile. They still have their 50% off their unlimited premium wireless offer that you got to go and get and take advantage of because it's not necessarily going to be around all the time.
And all plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Quit overspending on wireless with 50% off unlimited premium wireless. Plans start at $15 a month at mintmobile.com/territory. That's mintmobile.com/territory. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Over 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com.
We are back here on Snakes Territory. Once again, we'd really appreciate it if you're joining us on YouTube. If you would like this video here on YouTube, it helps us out a lot with the YouTube algorithm gods. If you would hit that subscribe button while you're at it, hit the bell icon as well so that you never miss an episode of the show. If you're joining us on an audio-only platform, it also really helps us out if you leave us a 5-star review So thank you in advance for doing all of those things. Jack, the Diamondbacks did do a thing since our last episode. They signed right-handed pitcher Taylor Clarke to a 1-year, $1.5 million deal. There are incentives built into the contract. It could escalate to just over $2 million. Of course, Taylor Clarke is a familiar name around here in the Diamondbacks organization. The Diamondbacks drafted Clarke in the 3rd round back in 2015. He appeared in 78 games for them from 2019 to 2021, eventually was non-tendered, and is coming off a pretty good season with the Kansas City Royals in 2025. So, Jack, your initial thoughts on the Diamondbacks reuniting with a familiar face here?
Well, when Taylor Clarke first came up, and during his first 3 seasons with the Diamondbacks, I was surprised by how good his stuff was. I mean, like, he threw harder than I thought he did, and I thought his stuff was pretty good. He just wasn't quite getting the results that you would hope for. And he had success with the Royals, so that's kudos to him. And now he turns around and he's back with the Diamondbacks on a free agent deal. It's not a big dollar deal by any means, but he has the potential to be a solid pitcher. The projections for him, I know he had a nice 3.25 ERA last year. The X stats were 3.69 xERA, 3.97 FIP, 3.68 xFIP. If you look at a 3-year average for him, his 3-year average FIP is 4.16, and everything else is right there too. xERA 3.97, xFIP 4.07. So, between 4 and 4.2. And sure enough, if you look at the projections, he's projected for 4.14 ERA by Steamer, and 4.25 from ATC, 4.72 from the bat. So, I mean, I don't expect a sub-4 ERA from him, just based on his peripherals and everything else. I expect it to be around 4-ish. But, if he's a solid enough 4 with a 50, 60 innings pitched, that has some value for the team. It's going to mean basically, pitchers like this, they have 2 good months and 1 pretty bad month. And then they have a good month and a half and then 1 pretty bad month. And you look up at the end of the day and, it comes in somewhere around 4. That's what you're getting here.
I was definitely surprised when I looked up Taylor Clarke's stats for 2025. Somehow I'd missed that he had an ERA in the low 3s with the Royals, 55 in the 3rd innings. It's not a small sample. His whip was 0.85, which is excellent and probably pretty unsustainable, given the all of the projection numbers and some of the underlying stats that you were just talking about. But I still think it makes sense. I mean, it's obviously a really low cost move at $1.5 million with some incentives in there. There's not a whole lot of risk in this move for the Diamondbacks. I did bring up this pitch map from Taylor Clarke, just comparing the pitcher he was the last time we saw him in 2021 on the left with the pitcher he is on the right in 2025, or the pitcher he was for the Royals in 2025. Couple things stand out to me here, Jack. Number one, he's throwing his slider a whole lot more. At least he did in 2025. That was his most used pitch at 40% usage. Back in 2021, he used his four-seamer 53% of the time. So that was his majority used pitch back then. The other thing that stands out to me is Taylor Clarke threw a sinker a decent portion of the time for really the first time ever in his career. I think maybe a number of years back, there's a few sinkers in there, but it's never been a significant pitch for him. And what stands out to me there is Taylor Clarke has never really been a big ground ball guy. He's generally run ground ball rates in the low mid 30s. And if you're not generating many ground balls, it really puts a lot more pressure on you to miss bats. And in 2025, he was able to run that ground ball rate back into the mid 40s in large part because of that sinker. And so I think it allows Taylor Clarke to be able to get by without missing as many bats. He's never been a guy who's going to, go out there and strike out 30% of hitters or anything like that. But he was able to generate more ground balls in 2025, still generate enough swing and miss to be effective. And he really didn't walk anyone either. He had just 9 walks in 55 in the 3rd innings. So from that perspective, he's gonna force you to beat him. He's a guy who is not gonna beat himself out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had a 208 BABIP against, so I mean,
Yeah,
clearly, no,
unsustainable for sure.
that's not likely to repeat. Look, if he can keep that ground ball rate and bump his K rate back up a little bit higher, who knows? You might get into that Goldilocks zone where he all of a sudden is like legitimately low threes. I mean, if he got back to 24%, 24 plus K rate and kept a 44% strikeout rate, that's kind of the stuff that's, really good pitchers are made of. Strikeouts and ground balls and nice combinations.
I wonder if he'll just like ditch the four seamer even more in 2026 because it's really just gotten hit hard for a number of years. I imagine you still have to throw it a little bit just to keep guys honest. Maybe that helps keep them off the sinker a little more. But in 2025, opposing hitters hit 306 with a mid 500 slugging percentage against the four seamer. The underlying numbers were even worse than that. So I wonder if that's something the Diamondbacks have in mind for Taylor Clarke. Be interesting to see what their approach is with him. In the bigger picture, though, Jack, I imagine you're not particularly satisfied with the bullpen as it stands right now.
Well, I mean, I pounded the table to no avail. They had a different plan than I did. They also might have had a different budget plan, which I fully understand. But I think Mike's made it very clear which direction they're headed. We even have a quote from him that's pretty clear here. So this is from Steve Gilbert's article, and Steve says they're still on the hunt for bullpen arms, but if you're holding your breath on them bringing in a bona fide closer at this point, well, don't. So that's pretty straightforward from Steve. And then here's Mike Hazen's quote. Would I like to have somebody that has a clear pedigree of pitching in the 8th and 9th inning, Hazen said. That's an easier answer. I'm not sure what we'll have access to in that way. I think if we continue to build out talent in the bullpen, this bullpen is going to be good in time as we move through the season. We're going to obviously be getting guys back as we move through the season. So I think the talent is naturally going to improve as we move through the year. So, that's pretty straightforward if you know Hazen speak at all. I mean, he's basically saying, look, I'm not signing Sir Anthony Dominguez for $8 or $10 million a year, just like I didn't sign Pete Fairbanks for $11 million a year or any of the other bona fide closers that make close to $10 million. That's not happening. He does not have access to that kind of player. It's also very clear that he's counting on Puck and Martinez coming back healthy and strong and hopefully not too late to bolster their bullpen. So, they're trying to do it on a shoestring here. They're doing bullpen on a shoestring, and they're going to hope that they can get by the first half of the season and then get reinforcements in the form of Puck and Martinez and maybe make a trade at the trade deadline. So that's what he's telling us right there.
Well, what could possibly go wrong, Jack? I mean, this approach has worked year after year after year, so it sounds great to me. Yeah, we'll see. Well, the jury's still out on how the Diamondbacks bullpen will perform in 2026. If you're a fan out there and not feeling so great about this approach, we can definitely understand where you're coming from. Meanwhile, Jack, as we've noted here at the bottom of the screen, the Dodgers, after the Diamondbacks signed Taylor Clarke, they of course felt the need to retaliate. They couldn't let the Diamondbacks go out there and make a move without responding. So naturally, the Dodgers went out and they signed outfielder Kyle Tucker to a 4-year, $240 million contract that my brain is still trying to process. And of course, this has inevitably sparked a larger conversation around the game, Jack, once again, about whether the Dodgers are ruining baseball, whether baseball's competitive balance mechanisms are just totally failing, and we're just seeing the Dodgers go out there and continue to just dominate offseason after offseason. So this drew a pretty big reaction around the sport, and understandably so. What were your initial reactions on this?
Well, first of all, I'm not surprised at all that Tucker ended up in LA. A matter of fact, in private text, I was joking with Alex D'Agostino, and it's like a week before he was signed, oh, the Dodgers are part of this conversation, and we just said, oh wow, he's so a Dodger. It just seemed like there was no doubt that he was going to end up there. I thought your tweet where you brought up the 4 points that can simultaneously be true was very appropriate. Mine was less so. I was being snarky. Mine went viral, so
yours did go viral. I don't have it offhand here, but if I'm remembering right, Jack. Yeah, the gist of it was that it is actually the Diamondbacks who are at fault here, because ever since they beat up on the Dodgers in the 2023 NLDS, the Dodgers have just been like going insane offseason after offseason, making sure they were never humiliated like that ever again. So yeah, maybe this is really on the Diamondbacks for setting the Dodgers on this course to begin with.
The fun part about that was how many people took what I said literally and was very seriously. I mean, I clearly was being sarcastic and snarky, but there were, the stupid thing got 100,000 views and like hundreds of retweets and, almost 100 comments and replies. And half of them were like, more than half of them were people that took it totally seriously. Guys, I was fooling around. I was just messing up. I'm allowed to have fun too, right?
My the tweet you referenced that I threw out there, I think there's a lot of nuance that gets missed in these conversations where people will lean, I think, a little bit too heavily in one direction and not acknowledge all of the aspects of this situation that are all true at the same time. So the 4 points that I mentioned are that, number one, the Dodgers are doing exactly what they should be doing. Number two, that they probably won't win the 2026 World Series, which I know there are people out there who don't believe me when I say that, but statistically speaking, it is pretty much never the case that one team is more likely to win than the rest of the field. It just doesn't work that way in baseball with how big the postseason field is and how much randomness there is along the way. I'm not saying they can't win again. They absolutely could. I just don't think it's the most likely outcome. Number 3 on my list was that some owners need to spend more. No surprises there. A lot of people have been making that case. That is certainly part of the problem. But number 4, my last point was that Major League Baseball's competitive balance mechanisms are flawed and are in need of fixing. I don't think we can just brush this off as a few owners aren't doing their part. The system's fine. It's just the few owners that aren't doing their part. I think we're past that now. I mean, the Los Angeles Dodgers, if you factor in the luxury tax penalties, they're paying over $100 million for Kyle Tucker to be on their team in 2026. And if you're going to try to convince me that all of the other 29 teams could have made the same investment, I do not believe you. I just do not think that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, look, forget about payroll disparity. Look at revenue disparity.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's that simple.
Forget the payroll disparity. Look at revenue, right? I mean, look at how much more money the Dodgers make. Now, some of that's self-fulfilling. The more you win, the more you bring in the Ohtanis of the world. I mean, obviously, Ohtani was a windfall for them. The other thing I want to remind everybody once again, because I just saw so much of the discourse again around deferrals, and everyone keeps forgetting that the team doesn't get to just hold on to that money and stick it in their pocket because they deferred that money. For example, Shohei Ohtani's net present value is $46 million. He's getting $2 million a year. And every July 1st, the Dodgers have to take $44 million and put that in an escrow account. They don't get to keep that money and stick it in their pocket and use however. They have to take $44 million and put it in an escrow account. And the same goes with every single deferral for every team, every player in the league. That's the league rules. So, yes, that money can earn interest, but at the same time, that amount goes to their CBT, their competitive balance tax number, and the Dodgers are going to be, shelling out well in excess of $100 million to other teams and to the pension. So, there is benefits to come there. I'm not excusing everything. I'm just, some of the debate about it is like so one-sided. Oh, well, the Dodgers are saving $68 million a year on Ohtani's contract, and they can use that to sign up. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
It's not how it works at all. This has been repeated so often. The information's out there, and yet even certain mainstream voices in the market were trumpeting this, deferral issue in an inaccurate manner, and it's a little frustrating to continually hear it.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think the deferrals thing is just way overblown. At the end of the day, the players are agreeing to this. I mean, if you have an issue with it, like it's worse for the players to accept a deal with deferrals than without. So the fact that those players are willing to take those contracts, I mean, that's ultimately a decision that is up to them. The other aspect here, Jack, is that this Kyle Tucker contract doesn't have that many deferrals in it. It's only 30 million out of the 240 that is in this deal. There's opt-outs after year 2 and year 3. And Kyle Tucker's a really good player. I'm not sure he's a $60 million per year player, but given the short-term nature of this deal, I guess it isn't a surprise that the AAV just shot way above what we figured it would be. And if you look at the steamer projections now, Jack, it is kind of the Dodgers and then everyone else. The Dodgers are now projected for 54.3 WAR. This is as of Monday afternoon that I pulled these numbers. Dodgers are at 54.3 projected WAR. The Blue Jays are in second place there at 46.6. And generally speaking, all the other teams are in pretty close proximity to each other, except the Dodgers are just projected for about 8 wins more than any other team. This is a pretty significant disparity. There's just no getting around that at this point.
Yep, that's absolutely true, and it's frustrating. Look, we want to see the Diamondbacks do better, and the reality is they probably do not have a pathway to win the division. I mean, right now the Diamondbacks are, give or take, 80 low 80s win team, something like that. So where things are at, by the way, don't just add 48 to that number on the far right. Because if you add them all up, it adds up to too many wins. So you have to cut off about 7% of that 48 replacement level wins. So really right now you add about like 44, 45 to the WAR number you see there. But look, the bottom line is that it would take an absolute strange occurrence of events for the Diamondbacks to have a pathway to win the NL West, and their only pathway is to try to get one of the 3 wild card spots and hope that their team is fully healthy and hot like they were in 2023. And, the odds of that happening are not very high. So it's very frustrating for the Diamondbacks and their fans. And that frustration is well heard and well received. I mean, I feel it too. I'm not downplaying any of that. I can get pretty dour and negative sometimes, much more so than when I'm on air here, as Jesse will attest. Every once in a while, I'll send him something cryptic, and I'll get this is a classic Jack Friday night tweet or text message.
I can attest that podcaster Jack has a much more positive outlook on the Diamondbacks baseball world in particular than over text Jack during the week. That is definitely a real thing. But yeah, there's unsurprisingly a big reaction on this around the league, with a lot of fan bases talking about how they don't really feel like they have a chance. And Jeff Passan, I thought it was notable. He, shortly after this deal came through, talked about how there are some players that feel like they don't have a chance as well. And that is certainly noteworthy as we head into CBA negotiations next winter. I mean, if people on the players' side are starting to feel this as well, where there's an imbalance in the game that just needs to be done away with. I don't know what the odds were of the lockout before this happened, Jack. I can't imagine they got any lower with this news. Probably around 100% either way, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, I want to give a shout out to my good friend and former boss, Jim McLennan over at AZ Snake Pit. So he wrote an article, MLB the Brokenest. And, I don't agree with everything that Jim said, but he brought up some really great points, as he always does. And one thing that really stunned me in the last paragraph of his article, he points out that it's worth noting that while the average baseball salary passed $5 million this season for the first time, the median salary, the point where half the players earn more and half earn less, dropped to 1.35 million. It's 300,000 lower than it was a decade ago, and that's not including inflation. That blows my mind. So wait a minute. In 2016, the median salary was 1.65 million. Now it's 1.35 million, and that's not an inflation adjusted number.
Wow.
So that's wrong. That stunned me, that fact. And Jim is like the ultimate fact checker, so he's usually fact checking me, so I'm not going to fact check him there. I believe his number. But at that number needs to change, and so I do think that you are going to see some things in the CBA. I think that we'll probably see another increase to the minimum salary beyond what it was now, a larger increase, and that has knock-on effects into arbitration. So pre-arb and arb players will probably get a little bit bigger slice of the pie coming out of the next CBA. If there's any cracks in the facade of the players union, that's where it's going to be over, is my opinion. And hopefully cracks in the facade means that there will be some kind of movement and compromise. They're not going to, look, baseball's not going to get a salary cap the way most people envision it. But look, they could always add another tier. One of the commenters at AZ Snake Pit made a really good comment. He says, well, just add another tier to the payroll penalties, 150%, 200%. Essentially, permanent payroll tax that's even higher level than it is now. Just keep upping that number. Eventually, there's got to be a pain point, even for the Dodgers.
I'd like to agree with that and be like, surely there is a number the Dodgers would be willing to pay. And you're probably right that at a certain point they would be dissuaded. But I mean, again, they're paying about $100 million for Kyle Tucker in I think it's well over $100 million for Kyle Tucker in 2026, which works out to more than the entire payrolls of several big league teams. So there's a problem here, Jack. There's no getting around that. I think pretty much everyone around the game on some level can acknowledge that. And it might be ugly next offseason, which we hope we don't lose baseball games as a result of this. I think that's kind of the biggest point for me is we really hope it doesn't come to that in the process. To round things out here, Jack, we did want to hit real quick on old friend Zac Gallen and his situation in free agency. Of course, we don't really expect the Diamondbacks to sign Zac Gallen, certainly not at this point in the offseason. But his market does have an impact on them. We've talked about it before. The D-backs would get a compensatory draft pick after the first round of the draft if he were to sign for $50 million or more. But that pick would fall to after the second round, really after competitive balance round B, if he signs for less than $50 million. So his market, where it lands, does have an impact on the Diamondbacks. And from the reporting we've gotten lately, Jack, it sounds like Gallen might wind up doing the short-term thing where maybe his guarantee is less than $50 million when all is said and done.
Yeah, well, I mean, that risk has always been out there. We've talked about it a lot and kind of got back and forth of where we thought he would end up. Midway through the season, I thought sure that they wouldn't get that early pick and that he'd have to do a short-term deal. Then he had the hot second half, and I'm like, okay, he probably saved it. And heading into the offseason, that's kind of where I was at. And I figured he probably, was going to get at least like 480 or something along those lines. And now here we are, it's January 19th. We're 1 month away from when the games start, and we're just a few weeks away from when pitchers and catchers report, and Zac doesn't have a deal. So this is starting to look like one of those Boris specials where his lesser non-top tier guys end up kind of taking it in the shorts a little bit, reaching a little too high. I mean, like if it had done a 360 or 480, I think it'd be done by now.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're asking for, but it appears to be too much.
This is from Ken Rosenthal's story on Friday. He said, one executive granted anonymity for his candor said Gallen might suffer for being one of the least attractive free agents among those who rejected qualifying offers. Players in that position attached to draft pick compensation are vulnerable to getting squeezed in the market. And yeah, no huge surprises there. I know Ken went on to say on Fair Territory today that, sort of speculatively, maybe Gallen takes a 2-year deal where there's an opt-out after the first year. Maybe he takes a 3-year deal where there's an opt-out after the second year, something like that. And I think if it's a 2-year deal, Jack, the D-backs are probably in danger of the guarantee coming in below $50 million. I'm not sure it necessarily would. If he gets to a 3-year deal, though, you probably feel pretty good about it. It's hard for me to imagine Gallen signing for 3 years and less than $50 million.
I'd agree with that.
So we'll see what happens. Certainly wish Zac the best as he looks for his next home. Again, we don't really expect it to happen with the Diamondbacks, but there are certainly teams out there that still need starting pitching, and there aren't really many names left who are better than Zac Gallen at this point. So we'll see how things shake out there. Well, thank you to all of you for being with us on this episode of Snakes Territory. Really appreciate your time. As I said earlier, be sure to like this video if you're joining us on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. Hit up snakesterritoryshop.com. Get yourself a t-shirt. I have mine going here as well. Or you can get a hat, as Jack is showing off there. It's a great way to support the show. If you're joining us on an audio-only platform, we'd also really appreciate it if you'd consider leaving us a 5-star review. That really goes a long way as well. You can find us on social media. I am at Jesse N. Friedman on Twitter. Jack is at ShoeWizard59, and our show is at Snakes Territory. And of course, Jack does a great job writing about the D-backs over at Arizona Diamondbacks on SI. So be sure to check out his stuff over there. Jack, any final thoughts here as we say goodbye and look forward to another week where maybe something will happen and maybe something won't?
I think we pretty much are past the point of predicting when a move is going to happen. The last thing I'll say is Randall Grichuk didn't sign until the second week of February in 24 and the first week of February in 25. So keep that in mind.
All roads lead back to Randall Grichuk as at the end of the day. Maybe that's where all of this is headed. We'll see what happens. Thank you again for being with us on this episode of Snakes Territory. We really appreciate your time, and we'll be back with another edition of the show very, very soon.